In this video, I wanted to provide an explanation and draw out an explanation for the process of transpiration. And in this process, we see plants losing water. And plants ideally don't want to lose water, but because of some of the structural arrangements of the plant, and specifically the leaves, we see them losing water, and so transpiration, you could describe it as plants sweating, for lack of a better explanation. And this process incorporates quite a few different steps or mechanisms, things that we've looked at previously in the year. So I'll start by drawing a plant. Please excuse my less than quality drawing here. And we want to look specifically at the leaf system. So these are meant to be different leaves. Little details here. And this other leaf to the side, I'm going to leave open so that we can describe some different portions of it. If you recall the different structures of a leaf arrangement, the very top of the leaf is called the waxy cuticle. And at this portion of the leaf, we're going to see where sunlight is absorbed, and it helps to provide a protective covering for the plant. Underneath that level is a level, kind of shade this in here, and this is the epidermis. Okay. Epidermis. And below the epidermis is going to be the tissue that we see gas exchange take place. So this area is called the mesophyll. And there's kind of two different areas of it. The first part are cells that are pretty tightly packed together. This is going to be the palisade, mesophyll. And then below that, the cells are not quite as tightly packed together. This allows for the gas exchange. And this layer is called the spongy mesophyll. And then we have a lower epidermis. We'll keep that in black so we can distinguish. So the lower epidermis. And this one that we did earlier is the upper. And then you'll notice that I left a little hole or an opening here. And this opening is called the stomata. And around the stomata are some particular cell types that I'm drawing in red. And these red cell types are called guard cells. The guard cells are where we see, or what allow the controlling of the opening and enclosing of the stomata. And the stomata are empty holes that allow gases to get into the leaf structure, specifically carbon dioxide, which we know from our photosynthesis unit is required in order for the plants to undergo photosynthesis. So the plant needs to bring in that carbon dioxide gas and also be able to release oxygen gas. But in order to do so, it's got to have an opening to be able to allow those gases to go in and out of the cell. And one consequence of that opening is plants are going to lose water, and plants do so out of the stomata. So let me zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to show water, blue again. water is going to come out of the stomata. And where that water is coming from is the structure of the plant that moves water throughout that structure. We use black to represent this, and that structure is called the xylem. Actually, let's not use black. We'll use pink so we can distinguish it. Draw in some xylem here. We see this both in the leaf structure as well as the stem of the plant. And the xylem is a hollow tube. It's kind of like a straw within the plant that allows water to move through it. And one of the unique characteristics of the xylem is they're actually dead hollow cells. And so the cells have died and they lose their internal organelles and components, and so that allows water to be able to move through it. And so what we see happen is water is going to evaporate out of the stomata. And water is going to evaporate because of a couple of different characteristics, but water evaporates due to heat. So an increase in temperature is going to increase the rate of evaporation. Humidity, wind would be some of the factors that can increase the rate of evaporation. So water's evaporating out of this area, and this causes an area of low pressure. We'll do this in red. And so because that water is evaporating, it creates low pressure near the stomata. And that's an important characteristic because now we have this area here that has a low pressure of water. There's not a lot of pressure of water. And if you think back to earlier in the year, we talked about some properties, some biological properties that water exhibits and demonstrates how they move through different structures and can actually move up through structures. And I mentioned this earlier in the year, but because of this low pressure that's created at the stomata, we have areas of high pressure where there is water. And so there's water within the xylem closer to the ground, to the soil. And so we have high pressure of water here. And so because of that, and because of these properties of adhesion and cohesion, the water is actually able to defy gravity, and it moves up the xylem and through the xylem, and it replaces the water that's lost at this low pressure. We know that water moves and particles move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. The same idea here, we're seeing water move from this area of high pressure to an area of low pressure to replace it. And so the water, through adhesion and cohesion, without those properties, this process wouldn't be possible, is going to move through and up the xylem and to the leaf structure. And so the plant is using the water in order to be able to conduct photosynthesis, as we've talked about. But in order for that process to be able to take place, the water's required, but some of it's lost through the stomata. The last part of this is, well, then how does the plant actually get more water, and how does it create an area of high pressure? And so now we need to look below the soil to explain how that takes place. And the plants have a root system. And within that root system, kind of like little finger projections. And this is actually where they take in water. So the water is going to diffuse within the roots. And what it's doing is it's moving through osmosis from an area of high water concentration relative to to low water concentration within the root system. And this is in relative to the soil to the root system. And so you could say it's moving through osmosis from a low solute concentration to high solute. So we have lots of water outside, so we have low solute. We have high solute inside the root system. And that solute is going to be a combination of minerals and ions that the plant needs in order to be able to survive, and how those minerals and ions actually get moved into the root system is through active transport. So there are pumps in the root system that are going to pump minerals and ions into the root system, and this is done through active transport. And if you remember from active transport earlier in the year, this is going to require ATP in order to take place. So the root system cells spend ATP and use active transport to pump minerals and ions into the root hairs and the root cells. In doing so, it creates this high solute concentration, which thus creates a lower concentration of water. As a result, through osmosis, water is going to move where there's more water, higher concentration to lower concentration, and so we see water flow into the root system. So water is actually getting into the plant through the root system. It then travels through the xylem, up through adhesion and cohesion through the rest of the plant, and replaces the water lost in the leaf due to transpiration in an area of low pressure. So again, the plants are using that water to be able to photosynthesize, but as a consequence of having a stomata open to be able to take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, O2, it has to have those stomata open, and as a consequence loses water as a consequence. Some plants have some really cool adaptations to help reduce the amount of water, especially those that live in really dry and hot environments. And in some of the other note videos, we'll discuss those a little bit further. So this is an explanation of transpiration and how water moves through the plants. Soil